In the Farbrengen, which this Sicha of Behaalosecha number 1 and Chelek Yud Gimel is based on, during that Farbrengen, 3 of those Sichas turned into Mugadika Sichas, into edited Sichas that are in Likutei Sichas, including one of them that we already learned in last month. We learned it in Parshas Emor, and it was immediately, this Sicha was immediately following the Sicha that we're going to learn now. So at that time, we studied about Zichron Trua, and this Sicha is also going to be about Trua Shofar, but a different Nekuda, which is on the Parsha of Behaalosecha. But I want to start with a story that the Rebbe said at that Farbrengen, even though at least at first glance it doesn't have much of a connection to the Sicha we want to talk about. It's a very geschmack story, and it's one of those stories that you don't want to skip on. So this was Shabbos Parshas Behaalosecha Tafshin Chav Zayin, 1967, literally a few days after the 6-Day War. And Rebbe shares a story that his father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, shared. That one time the Baal Shem Tov was sitting on a Suda of Rosh Chodesh in a way that you could see that he was upgetzagen, distracted, ululay Simcha, and he wasn't in a joyous, jolly mood. And the students, they used different techniques that they knew how to, get the Baal Shem Tov into a better space, but it wasn't working. Soon afterwards, a simple person, a Ish Pashut, whose name was David, comes in. The Baal Shem Tov calls him, sits this person next to him, and gives him a piece of his Hamoitzi, and then the Baal Shem Tov gets Besimcha. So the Talmidim were surprised with a big question. How is it possible that with all the effort through Inyanim of Torah, etc., they weren't able to convince the Baal Shem Tov weren't able to be poil on the Baal Shem Tov to be happier, and this simple person was able to be poil on the Baal Shem Tov to be Besimcha without doing really anything. And one of the people who had the surprise was the Maggid HaMezrich. He himself was surprised at this dynamic. So Baal Shem Tov, who felt that the Talmidim were surprised and interested, so he gave an errand to Reb David, so he could be able to talk about him not in front of his face. And when Reb David walked out of the room, Baal Shem Tov told them about who Reb David is. It says Reb David is a other man, a very poor person, whose parnasa comes very difficult. And he would gather penny after penny, because he had a dream that he's going to buy a Mehuda Dika Esrog. Eventually, he's able to buy the Mehuda Dika Esrog. He comes home with a big joy on the Esrog, and when his wife sees his joy, it bothered her, because she was very bitter about the poverty, the extreme poverty that was in his home. They didn't have anything for the food for Pasha to make Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot. And even though it bothered her and everyone else at home, Reb David didn't bother. And she was so irritated at his passivity to her issue and his joy about the esrog that from her bitterness, she took the esrog and bit the pitim off and made the esrog puzzle. Says the Baal Shem Tov, this Reb David didn't get emotional at all. No kas, no anger. Right away he thought, she's right. How does a simple Pashta Yid like me come to deserve such an esrog? And here the Rebbe says, here comes the continuation of the story that shows how poor Reb David is. There wasn't a lot of time till Yom Tov started, and he didn't have money to buy another esrog, and he had to make a bracha on the esrog of the community, which they would have for like the people who couldn't afford their own esrogim. But he didn't even have money to participate in that. And he didn't want to give a mashkain, to give something and be able to take it back later on, because he felt that that's not real payment. So he took one of the things in his house, one of his dishes, and he went to a guy, got money for it, and gave it to participate in the Esrog Ekol. And that's how you see how poor he was. They didn't even have a penny to participate. Says the Baal Shem Tov that this nisayon, and the Rebbe puts his words in from the Frierdiker. It's understood how big this Nisayon was, that after being able to receive an esrog mahuder, without being able to, without getting emotional over everything he went through to get this esrog, his wife broke it, and nevertheless he's quiet and doesn't get angry. And not only because he overcomes his anger, but he accepts it. I don't deserve it. Says the Baal Shem Tov, since the Nisayon of an Akedah, there was nobody who had such a test and passed it. What a story. What a story. Since the Nisayon, like you think that the second to the biggest Nisayon after the Akedah, some big act of Mesiras Nefesh. And what is it? This, the Mesiras Nefesh of not getting angry at his wife, for in her bitterness breaking the pitum, and for having a pashta acceptance of a scenario. I think that story is, that story is a shir on itself. But in the few minutes we have, let's give a synopsis, an insight onto the Sicha. The Sicha that the Rebbe says is based on the words, and the Rebbe actually encouraged to make a niggun on the video, v'yem simchaschem of mayadechem. And on your days of joy, and on your Yom Tov u'v'dachei chadshechem, and on Rosh Chodesh, maybe that's the connection to the story that happened on Rosh Chodesh. Uskatem b'chatzoises, you should blow chatzoises ala loisechem al zibchi shalmechem, for your karban oila and your karban shlamim, v'hayu lechem lezikar lifnei lekechem and Hashem lekechem, and that will be as a memory in front of Hashem. I am God, your God. Rashi says on the words ala loisechem, he says bekarban sibur akasam medaber, that the pasuk is talking about a karban sibur. In other words, it's not a private karban oila, but rather it's a karban oila that's brought on behalf of the community. And the Rebbe wants to know how Rashi got there. Then later on, Rashi uses on the final words of the pasuk, Ani Hashem Lekechem, he says, from here you learn Malchias and Zichronis v'Shofros. Because it says Uskatem, that's Shofros. It says Lezikaroin, that's Zichronis. And it says, Ani Hashem Lekechem, I am your God, in other words, I am your king, that's Malchias. Why is Rashi coming to tell us that? It's not Rashi's derech to stand tell us a nice pshetel. How is that in Pshutei Shel Mikra? And Rebbe says something, starts off explaining in a very, it's like so Pshutei Shel Mikra that it's amazing that until the Rebbe says it, you don't see it. What's the big Yom Simchaschem? The first two words in the pasuk, Yom Simchas, the day of joy. Which joy? It can't be Yom Tov because it says Mayadechem. It can't be Shabbos because it's not necessarily Shabbos. The Rebbe says not even up Yalachas. It's so simple that's a Yom Simcha. So when is it? It can't be a private simcha because why am I blowing shofar? So it has to be a general simcha. What is it? What was the pasuk before? The pasuk before was v'chisavayu milchama, when there's going to be a war. V'ayosim, you're going to blow shofar. V'niskartem, and you're going to be remembered in front of Hashem. In other words, shofar is going to cause a reward. What's the reward going to be? That you're going to be victorious. Uveyayim simchaschem, and on that day that you're joyous. Why are you joyous? Because you were victorious. Blow the shofar again. But now the problem is, now that I explained Uveyayim simchaschem, the karban sibur, it's a communal thing. Why is the communal thing? Because it's after a war that we just won. Why does it say Ani Hashem Lekechem? In general, when it says Ani Hashem Lekechem, it means Hashem is going to give a reward. But the reward was the fact that they won. So what, they're going to get another reward because they blow shofar after they won? Doesn't make sense. And therefore, it must be that it's coming to teach us something. What's it coming to teach us? Malchios im zichreines v'shefaris. That is medayik in the word im. That whenever you have zichreines v'shefaris, you'll always have to have malchios. Whenever you have the two of them, you'll always have the third of them. You won't have them independent. You always have to have malchios. And that's why the Torah bore Ani Hashem Lekechem, because we already mentioned V'hayu lezikaron uskatem echatzotzes, which is zichreines and shefaris, therefore we added this. Now the Rebbe goes into it al pi chassidus, but I'm just going to focus on Ois Yud, the way the Rebbe brings it into Avodah. Hisavayu Melchama, we know that whenever it refers to Melchama, Chassidus always tells us that it refers to Melchama Hayetzer, the Melchama that we have with our Yetzer Hara. With our tzad, the person who's putting us in lockdown, the person who's confining us. And when is the biggest time of battle? Shas Sleisa, Shas Krava. The time of davening is the time of battle. That's when the Yetzer Hara comes to fight. Comes the pasuk and says, Ki Savoya Muchama, the pasuk before, the one that the Sicha is based on. Ki Savoya Muchama, when you're going to have a war, what's Hadayosem? Chassidus explains. Leiv Nishbar, you break, that's what the shofar, you're breaking out with a kol pashut, you're literally screaming out HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Fine. But what happens after you win the war? Do I still need to have a broken heart? Do I still have to cry out Hashem? What do you mean? I was victorious. I'm doing great. Comes the pasuk and says, V'yem simchaschem. After you have the simcha, after you won the war, Vadayosem again. Blow the shofar again. Why? Because you have to keep that bittul, that's a brachenkeit, the broken heart, and the bittul to the Eibishter, Adirab, it has to be here more than ever before. And ala l'seichem. First and foremost, it's an oila. What's an oila? Kulil Hashem, it goes totally to Hashem. That's the first commitment. Your first commitment is that you're totally given to Hashem. Then you bring the shlamim, which is a little bit to me. In other words, I get a little benefit. Which means karban oila is avodas hatfilah, which you give totally to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Karban shlamim is like the avodah that you do the rest of the day, where you get the parnas out of it, where you get some benefit out of it. And comes Rashi and says, "Bekarban sibud akasav medaber." It's talking about this. Uvayim simchaschem. What's it coming to tell you? That avodah b'tfilah is not enough that it's for yourself, but you have to include others as well. It has to be for other people as well. Now, this Sicha that the Rebbe said, as we said, it's in the unedited version. It's a full Farbrengen, Tafshin Chav Zayin. Teres Menachem Chelek Nun. I recommend, if you can read it, to go and find it. And in the others, the Rebbe he adds a few things that didn't come into the edited version, but are more Farbrengen style. The Rebbe says, think about it, because the Rebbe talking about Avodas Hatfilah. Dafke in the time of davening, you have to talk Tvarim B'Telem. You could have spoken Tvarim B'Telem the whole day. And if you don't have time, 5 minutes away from business, 5 minutes away from the magazine, from the newspaper, and you could talk. Well, stuff, so then why do you have to read Farbrengen B'Telem now? That's what Rebbe says. And a few other Geschmack words. And then the final thing, as we just finished off the Sicha, where the Rebbe says that even when you daven, it shouldn't be for yourself. You have to be with the tzibur. The Rebbe says over there, when you're in Avodas Hatfilah, don't be about yourself. I have to just quote it, it's so beautiful, because then the Yetzer Hara can could drive him off the rails and tell him, while he's davening and crying with bitter tears and his head's covered in a talis, comes the Yetzer Hara and says, make sure that everybody sees you. The Yetzer Hara is not going to tell you to stop davening, because he knows you're not going to listen to him. And also, you're enjoying yourself. And therefore, he tells you, daven in a way that's piercing. Everyone should see you. So everyone should learn from you. Everyone should copy you. Why do you have to keep everything to yourself? Keep the oil mahaba for you. Leave something to everybody else. That everyone should see how you're crying under the talis. Yeah. But that's not what it means to join with the tzibur. To join with the tzibur is to inspire others, not to spend the whole Avodas Hatfilah where you're supposed to be thinking about you and the Eibishter and thinking about others. Anyways, l'chaim u'l'shalom.